Elise, do you have allergies?
Oh, do I have allergies? Year round, round the clock, 24/7.
Really? Year round?
365. Yes, year round. I'm allergic to everything. One of those weird kids had to sit at the table growing up.
Oh no.
Actually, no, that was by choice. I had friends though who had to sit at the table, and I felt kind of bad for them, but it actually ended up being really cool. But it's probably for the best anyway, because I'm allergic to everything, I feel.
Man,
Are you?
No. I do get allergies in the springtime, but I feel like that lasts for maybe like a week.
Yeah.
And then I'm good. I mean, I have a random allergy to Dove soap.
Oh, but, that's unfortunate. It smells lovely.
It's unfortunate. It is unfortunate.
It's very soft.
So do you have to take allergy medicine like every day?
Yes, I do. I'm allergic to like molds and dust and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh.
You know so my mom is actually an allergist. It's very convenient.
Oh,
and the allergy test where they just poke you down your arm, see what you're allergic to. I looked like Braille on my arm.
Oh my word.
So I am allergic to quite a few things. So here's my routine.
Okay.
If anyone's curious who also suffers from year-round allergies, I take half an Allegra every morning, although I was told I should take it at night so it can kick in.
Oh.
Not sure about that, but half so you don't dry out.
Okay.
A little bit of nasal spray. And when I was younger, I had to get allergy shots every week.
Wow.
But it really does make the difference. And doing a saline rinse of your nose, because there's a lot of pollen that gets filtered in through your nose and you're sneezing. You can't figure out why. Just flush it out.
This is great.
Yeah.
Great advice.
From me to you guys.
Yeah. A clarification, Elise is not a doctor, but she plays one on TV. So. Yeah. So I was fascinated because it is allergy season and lots of us are struggling with allergies as the pollen is coming out and our cars are looking yellow all of a sudden. So the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, they have ranked the top 10 U.S. cities for having the worst allergy conditions. Did you look at this list before?
I did glance at this right before, and I'm not too surprised.
Well, I was surprised. We were chatting about this. I was surprised that Atlanta, Georgia wasn't on here because it's terrible.
They had their highest pollen count in history, apparently.
Wait, really?
Last Friday or Thursday, I believe. Ooh. It was the highest in history. And let me tell you, I don't know about your sister, but my sister, who also lives right outside Atlanta, she called me and she said, it's such a nice day out, but absolutely no way I'm going outside right now. Like, everything is yellow. She said she has a red car. She's like, it's orange now. And it's just horrible.
Color mixing. Well, I was surprised that on their list that Wichita, Kansas is number one. I don't think of Kansas as being super allergy central. Most of these locations, well, not all, but a lot of them are on the East Coast. Like in North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia comes in at number 8. So let's see. So you guys know if your city is included, the top 10 states for allergies, starting with number 1, Wichita, Kansas, New Orleans, Louisiana, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oklahoma apparently is just horrible for allergies. Memphis, Tennessee, Little Rock, Arkansas, Raleigh, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, Greenville, South Carolina, and Greensboro, North Carolina. So if you live in any of those places, consider
a routine.
Consider Elise's professional opinion on allergies.
Professional, big air quotes. Well, I saw that Georgia had the highest pollen count, their highest pollen count in history on Twitter, and people in the comments.
Are you really interrupting? Oh my gosh. So we have did you really buy those for us?
Yes.
Guys, this is our good friend. Yeah. Wow. Are you just dissing us?
Do you
on problematic women?
You powder pollen onto it?
Well, yeah, there you go. That's, see how easy it
Thank
is
you.
Thank you, Tim.
Emotionally, I could get you to vote for anything. Like
oh my goodness.
Anyway, they're a million calories each from next door.
It looks.
Everyone should watch this.
Looks
the size of my head.
I love it. Okay, so that's the only time we allow a man to interrupt problematic women is when he brings us
treats.
Muffins. That's hilarious. I have to give the backstory of that. So our good friend Tim Young, he has an awesome show. If you don't, thank you, Elise. If you've not watched it, check it out. But we got in a little bit of a tiff for tat just before we started recording this show. Because there's a Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who introduced a new proposed a rule in Congress to say that proxy voting should be allowed for women who have given birth within the last 12 weeks. Her rule also included men who, new fathers. And our good friend Tim Young, very opposed to that. It's like, absolutely not. That should not be allowed. I take the position that, and the reason why he opposes it is because, like, where do you stop, right? You allow it, and then, well, okay, someone twists their ankle, and are they allowed to do proxy voting? I'm like, no, I think you set a hard and fast, very, very clear line. And I would actually not do it for men. I would literally only do it for women, that if, as a woman, you have given birth as a member of Congress within the past 12 weeks, someone can proxy vote for you. Well, Tim strongly disagrees with me and wanted to come on the show to discuss it.
Yeah, just those physical limitations.
But I understand the argument that it's a slippery slope and that it could easily get out of hand. At the same time, I understand that a woman who gave birth a week ago is not necessarily in a position to be able to go vote in Congress. So I think there's a practical element to making sure that you're serving the needs of both the men and women who serve in Congress.
Definitely.
Oh, I actually don't know your opinion on this, Elise. Do you have an opinion on this?
I'm not sure I have a strong opinion on this, because I do see both arguments really well. I think where I'm trying to reason my way through this is thinking, if you are a congresswoman, you're not just some like lower level staffer. You are driven. You are very opinionated, strong, intelligent. So when I think of people who take maternity leave and like sometimes even just transition into being a stay-at-home mom, I'm just wondering, like, does the congresswoman personality blend well or like translate over to like stay-at-home mom personality? Because then I'm like, okay, proxy voting, but then like, where does it stop? Like, oh, my toddler has to have this really big surgery or something, which is very important. Like, you should not be going to your job if your toddler's having surgery. Yeah. So I'm just like, I don't know where it stops and like how. I really just don't have, you know what I mean? I don't have
it is a slippery slope. But that's why I think you have to make
within
it
itself
so clear. Like it would require literally, I think it should require literally a doctor saying, yes, or even having to show like a child's birth certificate showing yes within the past 12 weeks, and literally only for women within 12 weeks giving birth. Yeah. Again, I totally understand the slippery slope argument.
Slippery slope. Yeah, I think but between like who it applies to, but then also just within itself, like when does it stop? Like, when do you stop giving these exceptions to these mothers? But then it's like, okay, if this doesn't encourage motherhood, is it more conservative to like stay in Congress, or is it more conservative to just be a stay-at-home mom? And who knows?
You said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, so something to chew on.
Something to chew on, as we'll be chewing on our cruffins.
I'll be chewing on that for days.
Maybe that's the only reason why I disagreed with Tim, was just like, I feel like you're going to buy me a cruffin if I disagree with you.
Have these gifts more often.
Now I know I get baked goods if I disagree with Tim Young. So there we go.
My boyfriend is watching.
Oh!
Take note.
This is the way you weasel back in.
This is the way.
Okay, well, that was a great rabbit trail that we just went on. If you are joining us for the first time here on Problematic Women, we are so glad to have you. Thank you. We release every single Wednesday on YouTube and Rumble. And then I apologize to those listening just on audio. You were probably like, what on earth just happened with like this random man walking in and interrupting? So thank you for bearing with us through that. If you want to see all of the wildness and craziness that we enjoy having here on Problematic Women, you can catch the video on YouTube. But again, we release on all podcast platforms Thursday. And here on Problematic Women, we just embrace the fact, hence our title of the show, that as conservative women, we're pretty problematic to the left and to their definition of feminism and what a strong woman should be. So we talk about all the issues that conservative women care about, and we sort through the news every single week to make sure that you don't have to, and we're bringing it straight to you. So, without further ado, we are going to get into some big topics that have been happening in the news recently. And then later on in the show, I am so excited that Congresswoman Harriet Hageman is sitting down with me for an exclusive conversation, sharing her story. She is the lone congresswoman representing the people of Wyoming. It is actually a very small state population-wise. So they only have one member in the House of Representatives, and that is Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. So we have a fantastic conversation. She is so fun and just fiery, and I so appreciate who she is and what she brings as a member of Congress. So catch that conversation a little bit later in the show. But Elise, we're talking today about some of the major differences that we've seen over the past 2 months, because we actually have a new president in the past two.
President who knows what's going on.
Who knows what's going on.
It's nice.
So a lot has changed.
A lot has changed. I feel like I've beat this term to death, but there's been a vibe shift. There's absolutely been a vibe shift. It's really... I feel as excited today, almost 100 days out from his inauguration, as I was on day one, on inauguration day. And also, I feel like, there's something going on correctly when the left is like shaking in their boots at every corner. Yep. And they just, I feel like they don't know what their direction is, what exactly they're fighting against, except, Orange Man bad. So it's been really interesting to see everything get flipped on his head, 180, and have to see people who have been, quote unquote, like winning, have to like fight now.
Well, and I think you're right on that side with the Democrats, that they're having a crisis of identity. And I'll be very clear and fair and say Republicans have gone through this crisis in recent years as well. But I think because of Donald Trump have really found like, okay, this is kind of who we are as a party. We're moving in a new direction. A lot of new people have come into the party. And now Democrats are going through the same crisis of, we know that these woke radical policies are not policies that the American people love. And yet they have members like AOC who are just doubling down on those. Whereas then a lot of the base of the party, they're still voting very radically, but you really question, guys, are you understanding what Democrats across the country, what your voters want? Because they don't want these radical policies. Like,
and based on the Democrats in my life, I really don't know what they want personally either. And also, I think step one, they're just looking for their main guy. It used to be Obama. It used to be, well, I don't think Biden was their main guy for a while.
Well, and that I think is a key part of it, because you think about the Democrat Party, again, here we are on rabbit trails, but like who is the face of the Democrat Party right now?
I can't think of anyone.
Yeah.
Hakeem Jeffries? No. Cory Booker?
No.
Sorry that you talked for 25 hours straight, but it's not you, man. AOC?
No, definitely not.
Her and Bernie are on tour right now. I don't know what they're doing. I really hope they figure it out soon.
Good for them. Well, when you look at that difference, I think one of the most striking things that even this week has been highlighted is we saw literally on day one this hard pivot from going from the Biden administration to the Trump administration of laws actually being enforced.
Yes.
Wild.
It's wild. I thought there was going to be a transition period where they would slowly ease into it. I assumed, foolish of me to assume.
Straight into the deep end. And number one, obviously Trump was so clear on border and immigration, but we've seen this crackdown that already the Trump administration just announced this week 100,000 deportations. That is a lot of people they are getting out of our country. We know literally thousands of those are criminals, are gang members, people with criminal records, and they're being deported to places like El Salvador. And these are people under the Biden administration. There were 662,000 individuals who came into our country illegally, who either had pending criminal charges or had already been convicted of crimes. And these are the people that now want to talk compare and contrast. Literally, the Biden administration opened the door to, and now the Trump administration is putting on planes and sending to prisons in El Salvador, like this one that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem just visited last week. Let's play this.
Visiting this facility. And first of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
Like, wow. That sends a clear message.
The imagery. I've noticed that's a theme with the Trump administration 2.0, the visuals and the imagery of all of their public appearances, from Trump getting rid of the Department of Education with a bunch of kids at desks, and his women in sports executive order being surrounded by a bunch of young girls, and then this showing the actual criminals behind her. It's very it's cruel, and it evokes a negative emotion, but rightfully so. And I can't imagine how that must feel if you are someone who isn't so good with the law.
Yep.
And you're watching this.
Well, and I think they've just time and time again hit that messaging on the head. And it's critical to understand this as someone who covers border and immigration pretty extensively. You realize more and more and more, there is an effect to the words that we're using and the message that gets out, because what happened under the Biden administration is individuals came across and then they literally got on phones. I've had multiple officials at the border tell me this, that they would watch individuals who had crossed the border illegally get on their phone and call home and be like, hey, yeah, I made it. You should come too. And it trickles down. But if the response instead is, oh, shoot, if you come, you're going to end up in prison, that's pretty clear.
That's very clear. And that's something that over the past 4 years of the Biden administration, it wasn't, at least for me, and it was not talked about enough, that it's not just people who are here illegally and their crime is that they're not here legally. It's people whose crime is that they're not here legally, and also that they are out here hurting our communities. So, like, you hear about that in conservative media a lot, but just on the national stage, that's not the narrative that was being pushed. And it's really easy, even as a conservative, to just kind of like forget it and just be like, oh, well, that's like a really cruel and mean image. And it's like, no. We are getting rid of the people who are endangering Americans, endangering women and children. And that's the whole point.
Yeah, no, these are violent criminals. These are the people like the individual who killed Laken Riley or Rachel Moore. These are people that we do not want in our country, and we certainly don't want them bringing their friends into the country. But I was interested to you think of all these different examples, but even Attorney General Pam Bondi coming out this week and saying that the federal government is going to seek the death penalty in the case of Luigi Mangione. And this was interesting to see them again really be clear. If you commit crimes in this country, you're not getting off easy. We are coming down hard on you. So Luigi, for quick reminder, you probably remember that name. Back in December, he is accused of, has not been convicted yet, but is accused of shooting and killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in New York City. Police picked him up several days later.
In a McDonald's, I believe.
McDonald's, yeah, because apparently the guy recognized his unibrow from TV. Wild.
My conspiracy is that McDonald's has like the federal government has like facial recognition in all these facial scanning things at like Whole Foods, McDonald's, even on your phone. So like I genuinely believe the McDonald's self order tipped him off, and that's a lesson to just order it up front with the cashier.
That's hilarious.
But no, his eyebrows are very recognizable. They're very recognizable.
So, they really, really
his
are.
mugshot did go viral.
It did. It went very viral, and he's gone viral as sort of this hero of the left. Like, it's very weird.
It's very strange. It's honestly because he's conventionally attractive. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
and it's just weird because it just feels like him and the left are cosplaying like vigilante justice, and
it does.
They're like, oh, he's like this. He's like if we could root for Ted Bundy, because Ted Bundy was attractive, but he was horrible, so we can't root for him. But hey, we have Luigi Mangione and vigilante justice, so we can get behind this guy, right?
Yeah.
So weird.
Which is exactly why Pam Bondi is saying we're going to seek the death penalty because I think it's that clear message. If anyone else would ever think of doing something this horrific, you could face the death penalty. And that message has to be incredibly clear because this is not acceptable in any world ever.
Definitely. And it's a case where on the one hand, you do feel kind of a little, I mean, like just as a person, feel a little bit of sympathy for him because it's like he's not nearly the first person to kill someone. I mean,
I don't know that I feel any sympathy. I'm like, if he's guilty,
yeah,
no
he's not
sympathy.
the first person to kill someone, but also if he, in his manifesto and everything that he believed, wanted to become this, like, kill this CEO as a symbol of like how messed up the healthcare system is, you're going to become the symbol when people seek justice against you. Like, if you put yourself up on that pedestal, I don't really feel bad that the Department of Justice
is coming down
on you to like make an example of you.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, if he is guilty, if a court of law finds him guilty, you should be made an absolute example of. And you know, there's obviously a lot of people on the conservative side disagree with the death penalty. And that's a whole other conversation. I think there are situations where it is appropriate. But it's going to be really fascinating to see how this plays out. But that was not the only big announcement that Pam Bondi made this week. She also announced that for all those people out there that are throwing bricks and keying Teslas and all of these things, you could find yourself in some pretty deep legal hot water pretty soon. Let's take a listen to what Pam Bondi had to say.
I've made it clear if you take part in the wave of domestic terrorism against Tesla properties, we will find you, arrest you, and put you behind bars. Today, I'm proud to announce that the Department of Justice has unsealed federal charges against another Tesla attacker. We've charged Cooper Frederick in the firebombing of a Tesla dealership that occurred on March 7th in Loveland, Colorado. All of these cases are a serious threat to public safety. Therefore, there will be no negotiating. We are seeking 20 years in prison. The crime was committed in Colorado, and thanks to the great investigative work by the FBI, the defendant was arrested in Plano, Texas. Let this be a warning. You can run, but you cannot hide. Justice is coming.
Whew, so clear. Chills.
Can I just say, she looks great.
Yeah, she does.
Her and Kristi Noem,
classy.
They looked great.
They are classy women that are just leading the charge on this like almost balancing of the scales of justice.
Definitely.
Literally. And I was thinking about that term, domestic terrorism, and it's absolutely accurate that for Tesla drivers, I think across the country, probably a little bit more keen to, you know, make sure your car is locked, to maybe park it in a different location where it's not as visible anymore.
I know.
It's not a great time to be, and in full disclosure, I need to disclose I do have Tesla stock. Not much. It's not doing great right now because of this. But it has to be this clear message of this won't be tolerated.
Exactly. Because, I mean, what was it? Not even 4 years ago, like literally last year, it was the Democrats and the liberals who are all like, we're going to make 1/3 of the cars in the U.S. Electric cars. That's what Tesla is. And it's just crazy to see them flip-flop. I'm going to be misquoting this, and I don't even know who the original person was, but someone said that like the Democrat Party doesn't really have core tenets anymore. Their core tenet is that it's just anti whatever the Republicans are doing.
Yep.
And this is exactly an example of that. And yeah, no, it's very sad to see people who just bought Teslas now get it them defaced. And also it's very interesting. I have seen here in DC a good number of Teslas with the sticker, I bought this before Elon went crazy. Yep. And it's funny seeing them on Cybertrucks because Elon quote like, you know, went crazy and became like MAGA. And then released the Cybertruck. So I'm like, no, you didn't. Like, you're lying. But it almost feels like, you know, putting the blood over your door.
Yeah.
So it passes over you if you put that sticker on your Tesla, so the violence passes over. But
no, I've seen a sticker like right below the logo on a Tesla that says Elon with like the circle and the X through it. It's like, what are you doing?
I'm like, no one's thinking of you that hard. Like, no one thinks of you that much.
Yeah, exactly.
So annoying.
Very, very fickle. It's like, we're going to save the world from climate change by buying a Tesla. Wait, just kidding.
And then the environmental impact of burning these Teslas, like the carbon emissions must be crazy that they're putting into the environment. I thought we were all about that, guys.
Apparently not. They don't care. They just want to destroy the rights.
Exactly.
Well, I think one of the other big switches that has been really encouraging to see is a rise, I think, in patriotism. It feels like with this return to protecting our borders, to really going after criminals, to clamping down on out of control radical policies of the left, whether defending women's sports or preventing kids from being able to transition to another gender. All of those things have restored this sense of patriotism in America.
I definitely feel that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do at night is watch these YouTube videos that show how fashion and culture influence each other, and sometimes even politics. I've just fallen down that rabbit hole. And something that I definitely know is true is I feel like I can tell the rise in patriotism because of the resurgence of the Ralph Lauren knit American flag sweater.
Oh, and you wore that to the cherry blossoms, right?
Yes. Love that sweater.
It's a great picture.
It's great. It's just been so trendy over the past year, I think. And I definitely have been seeing so many of those out and about, specifically in 2025 in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
I couldn't even imagine wearing an American flag sweater when I started college in 2020 and just being proud of being an American. But now you see people on the right and left just supporting the American flag and patriotism. And I think that's great.
It's really great. It's encouraging. Well, and I'm going to be really curious to see when we get official polling for 2025, I'm going to be really curious to see where the trend has gone because Gallup poll, they do a poll every year to kind of gauge where is American patriotism at. And between under the Biden administration, between the years 2020 and 2024, they reported the lowest numbers of patriotism that the country has seen in recent history. Only between 38 and 42% of Americans over those 4 years said that they were extremely proud to be American. And I would put money on the fact that by the end of 2025, we're going to see an increase.
Oh, yeah.
In that number.
I'm really interested to see the demographic breakdown of that, too.
Yes.
Not just like between the right and the left, because we know one side's going to be a little bit stronger than the other, but also between just like, oh, are you from an immigrant family or not? Because that is something I've noticed a lot.
Immigrants are very proud to be American.
Yes, how proud they are. My mom always so proud of being an American, and it's like, don't take any of this for granted. Just ages too.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Gen Z is definitely very hopeful and patriotic.
Yeah.
Even though some of the louder voices are not, but I definitely am really curious to see that numbers breakdown.
It's going to be great. Well, and that was something that with Congresswoman Hageman I talked about, and I think she broke it down so well because she's someone that kind of lived the American dream, and I was really fascinated to talk with her about how she grew up because it's not how probably most current members of Congress grew up. Very, very unique story, but she has literally lived the American dream. And she, during our conversation, she was like, yeah, it's incredible to see this newfound really sense of pride in our country that all of a sudden is back in excitement to be an American. So I think with that, we should go ahead and get to the conversation with Congresswoman Hageman. But before we get there, real quick plug, if you want more news broken down every day, you want to keep up with what's happening because it's nonstop. It is nonstop. And Trump is keeping us all very busy in a good way. You can check out the Daily Signal podcast, Top News in 10. Our colleague, Tony Kinnett, now hosts that show. He does an amazing job in 10 minutes just running through the news of the day. This is what you need to know. And that show now releases every single weekday morning. So you can, on your drive to work in the morning, as you're getting ready for the day, you can just quickly catch up on what you need to know. So check out the Daily Signal's Top News in 10 wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's go ahead and hop over to my conversation with Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. Well, it is my absolute privilege to be sitting down on Problematic Women with Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. Congresswoman, welcome to Problematic Women. It is a joy to have you.
Thank you for having me today. Yes.
Oh, this is so fun. So I was recently, and we were also just chatting a little bit about where you grew up, but I was researching Wyoming in preparation for our conversation today, and I didn't realize that it is, as far as landmass, the least populated state in the U.S. It has a population of around 600,000, but landmass, it's big. It's over 97,000 miles, which then I was thinking about you campaigning in a state like that. Mm-hmm. Must have been a lot of road time.
So my district is the largest district in the United States outside of Alaska.
Wow.
But in Alaska, they fly a lot.
Yeah.
In Wyoming, we drive because we don't really have intrastate flights other than if you contract with someone. And that's astronomically expensive. So when I ran for office in 2022, I covered 50,000 miles in 13 months driving around the state of Wyoming.
It's a lot of mileage.
It is, but it's a beautiful state.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's very, very high on my list. It's hard to get to, although we were just talking about your flights back and forth, and you do that very, very well, coming back and forth between Wyoming and DC constantly. But the city that you were born in Wyoming, Fort Laramie, I think as of 2023, the population was 215.
I think it was higher when I was growing up. I think it was about 350.
Okay, much bigger.
Much larger. So I grew up outside of a town called Fort Laramie, and that was the gateway to the West. That was the first fort west of the Mississippi. So everybody who was going west on the Oregon Trail came through Fort Laramie, Wyoming. And our ranch is just north of the old fort. As the crow flies, maybe 3 or 4 miles, maybe 5 miles. So I grew up in a very historical area. The Oregon Trail ruts are there, Register Cliff. The old fort is a national park. It's still a beautiful facility if you enjoy Western history. Yeah. And that's where I grew up.
Oh, that's so special. How stereotypical would you say was your childhood to what many of us on the East Coast will think of when we think of growing up on a ranch in Wyoming? Was it cowboy hats and horseback riding and all of that?
It was a lot of that. And probably my upbringing, at least until I was about 8 or 9 years old, was more typical of what you would see a lot earlier in time than my generation, really. But that's because the ranch that my parents bought, they purchased their first ranch in 1961, the year before I was born. And when they bought that ranch, they had 4 kids. When they brought me home from the hospital, I was their 5th child. My oldest sister was 5 years old. They were over $200,000 in debt, which is about $2 million in today's money. They had $35 in the bank. Wow. And when they moved there, this was the ranch is actually on the Cheyenne to Deadwood Stage Trail. So we lived in a home that when they first moved there, they did not have electricity. They eventually brought that in, but we did not have a telephone. We were pretty isolated, but we did, we were raised where I was driving when I was 4 years old to help Dad feed. We were riding horses. We were moving cows. We were fixing fence. We were all very engaged in the ranching business because you had to be. I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of ranching families had lots of kids, because that was the cheap labor, and that was no exception in my family.
Yeah. Wow. That is a very, very unique and just very special way to grow up.
It was a wonderful place to grow up. I loved it. And I still go home. The ranch is still in my family. My brother Hugh has the ranch with his sons, and I go home on a pretty regular basis because it's only about 100 miles north of Cheyenne. Okay. And we have an extended family that has been involved in ranching for well over 100 years. My great-grandfather came north from Texas in 1879 on the cattle trail. Okay. So he brought cattle north to Wyoming in the late 1870s. And then he ended up settling there, and he was in the Wyoming legislature in the early 1900s. And so I've got an extensive family throughout Wyoming, primarily associated with ag and education. My mother, grandmother, aunts, sisters, sister-in-laws, all educators. And then I kind of strayed and became an attorney.
But before because I want to talk about that. I want to talk about your journey into being an attorney and then into politics. But before you went that direction, you did sort of stay a little bit in with your undergrad degree in a bit of the family industry business around cattle and specifically that of livestock and looking at livestock.
Well, no doubt. So in high school, I enjoyed taking the shop classes. My favorite classes were math, shop, and English literature. And so I took shop, and with that, I was also a member of what's called FFA, or the Future Farmers of America.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, I received a scholarship to go to Casper College, a community college in Wyoming, and I judged livestock from 81 to 83 and traveled around the country going to stock shows, whether it was Houston or Louisville or Denver or Fort Worth, the big stock shows, and we would judge livestock, and then also other colleges. So traveled around and had that opportunity when I was in college, and it was a wonderful experience.
It just sounds really fun.
It was fun.
So you were just telling me, and I have to ask because I think this is so fascinating, especially for our audience, but if you were judging a milk cow, what are you looking for?
So I actually really enjoyed judging the dairy cow. I did that more in high school, but you look for confirmation. And if you're looking at a female dairy cow, you're looking at everything from their pins and their hooks and pins, which is their hip bones, which is going to be the strength of them being able to carry calves and produce milk. You're looking at basically how good they are in producing milk. And so you look at the body shape, you look at conformation, you look at how strong their legs are. You want to make sure that they're going to be able to produce 67, at that time, probably 60 to 70 pounds of milk today. I think milk cows are now well up into the 90 or 100 pounds of milk a day. They're incredibly efficient.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was fun.
So why go from that, judging cows, you're really, in so many ways, I think, living a little bit of the American dream, and then you decided, all right, I want to add this maybe more complex or complicated element to life of becoming a lawyer and ultimately entering politics. What was kind of the factor that first got you interested in politics?
My parents were always actively involved in politics.
Okay.
And we always had a lot of discussions because for most of growing up, we didn't have a TV. So we spent a lot of time reading and engaging. And
it's healthy.
So I knew when I was 9 I was going to be an attorney.
Really?
So it was not that's just what my goal always was. So that's what I strove for, and that's what I ultimately did. So that was just kind of the plan of action, and my family very much encouraged me to do that, especially my father.
Yeah.
That was something he was very interested in, having someone in the family who was an attorney, and my skill set seemed to work in that direction. So I received my bachelor's degree in general business administration in 1986 and then graduated from law school at the University of Wyoming in 1989. But I always wanted to be a trial attorney. And so that's what I did for 34 years before coming back here as a member of Congress and Wyoming's lone member of the U.S. House of Representatives. But I was a water, natural resource, and constitutional attorney for many decades in Wyoming, and also practicing throughout the United States. So I, at one time, was licensed in Michigan, Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming. I'm licensed before the United States Supreme Court. I had a very unusual case starting in 1986. I was hired by the state of Wyoming as a senior assistant attorney general to handle what's called Nebraska versus Wyoming, which was an original jurisdiction case in the U.S. Supreme Court, which is a very unusual kind of litigation of a dispute between two states. And so I had the opportunity to do that, which was just fantastic. And as soon as that case was resolved, then I started my own law firm, and I worked for ranchers and farmers and gravel pit owners and construction companies and oil and gas producers, and really just anybody who was producing things, making things, building things. I did a lot of very complicated litigation, a lot of cases against the federal government, a lot of cases against federal overreach, EPA, Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, USDA, Corps of Engineers. I had lots of lawsuits against federal agencies, either suing them or having them sue my clients, where I defended.
And were those the cases that made you think, I want to run for Congress and I want to do something about this, or was it something else?
I didn't intend to run for Congress.
Whoops. You have now twice.
Well, so those were the cases that led me to understand how overwhelming the administrative state has become in the United States, and how Congress has largely abdicated its responsibility for legislating and turned that over to the executive branch through the administrative agencies and under the the Administrative Procedure Act. So I have for years been dedicating myself to traveling around the country and focusing on overregulation and what I believe unconstitutional actions by administrative agencies. So near the end of my litigation career, I actually went to work for a nonprofit law firm that we solely focused on constitutional cases, primarily against the federal government, but against some state agencies as well. And every single case had to have a constitutional component to them, but they also had to be administrative. So we weren't suing over bills or statutes. We were always suing the administrative regime. So the law firm that I worked for at that time was one of them who was involved in the Loper-Bright decision, for example, overturning the Chevron deference case.
Okay.
So there I filed one of the very first lawsuits in the United States challenging vaccine mandates, is an example. I filed lawsuits against various agencies on private property rights and protecting private property rights. So we always had to have the constitutional hook, but it was primarily going after the administrative behemoth. So that's what I was doing. The reason that I made the decision to run for Congress was that because Wyoming only has one representative, I think we really need to make it count.
Yep.
We need to focus on what is in the best interest of Wyoming. Wyoming is a phenomenal state for many reasons, as we were talking about. It's absolutely beautiful. Yellowstone National Park, Grand Teton National Park, Devil's Tower, lots of open space, gorgeous rivers, #1 blue ribbon fishery in North America, beautiful ski areas, wonderful snow, fabulous ranches and farms. I mean, it's just from a natural resource standpoint, it's incredible, but it's also one of the largest energy producers in the nation. We're the largest coal producer. We're the 8th largest oil and gas producer. We have some of the highest quality, highest reserves of uranium. We have rare earth minerals. This isn't an energy industry, but we're the largest trona producers in the nation. Our only competitors are China and Kazakhstan. Trona is what you use to make flat glass, baking powder, baking soda, all of those things. And we have the largest trona mines in the entire United States and the highest quality in the world.
Wow.
So I want to protect those industries. And I did not feel like my predecessor was here on behalf of Wyoming. I felt that she was here on behalf of herself, the military-industrial complex, and then near the end, the effort to destroy President Trump and anyone who was one of his supporters. So I was looking around. I was looking at the people who were indicating their interest in running. I felt it was imperative that we win that race and throw her out of Wyoming and get her back to Virginia where she belonged. And so I was just pretty adamant that it was time to retake that seat and bring it back to Wyoming.
Well, and that's exactly what you did. You announced you were going to run for Congress in 2021. Had a very successful campaign. You now, of course, were reelected in 2024, serving your second term in Congress. I do want to ask a follow-up on those, just all those resources that Wyoming has. Are we fully utilizing those?
No, and we could do so much more. And that's why probably my biggest priority in Congress is to ensure that we are accessing, using, managing our affordable and reliable energy. A lot of the bills that I have done are trying to expose the previous administration and their goal of energy poverty, which I don't believe in. You know, and I had the opportunity on the Natural Resource Committee one day to question Deb Haaland, who was the previous head of the Department of Interior. And I said to her, why is it that every single policy you and this administration adopt result in energy poverty? I don't think that's right. I think it's absolutely wrong for a government to try to punish its citizens, especially when it's bad policy from top to bottom. And the only thing that she could say is, well, we're in a transition. And my response is, what does that mean? What does that mean? And a good friend of mine said it best, and you can either be a lord of scarcity, which I think that the Democrats have demonstrated that they are, or you can be a champion of abundance. I believe in being a champion of abundance. Our government is of, by, and for the people. I'm a representative. I'm not the boss. I'm merely a representative. All of us here are merely representatives. Whether you're in Congress, the House, or the Senate, or you work for an agency, you're still working for the public at large. And it is not our responsibility to try to make people suffer. You know, I look at some of the horrible policy decisions that have been made over the last 20 to 30 years because of the obsession and hysteria surrounding global warming and climate change, and the destruction that that has caused primarily to low-income people around the world. What we have done in sub-Saharan Africa, what we have done in third world countries is just really a crime against humanity because we will not allow them to access affordable and reliable energy. And I don't believe that that's government government's responsibility. I think that to the extent anything is changing, we can adapt because we have the technology and the know-how to do it. I don't think that you destroy your economy. I don't think that you force people into choosing between food and medicine. I don't believe that you create a situation where your children are, their life expectancy is 40 years rather than 80.
Yep.
The use of affordable, reliable energy, our life expectancy has skyrocketed, infant mortality rate has dramatically decreased. So whenever we talk about using these resources and they want to scream hysterically about global warming and climate change, I can assure you that people 100 years from now are going to be a lot worse off if we don't access these resources than if we do.
Well, and I think you have to ask the questions of who are the winners of that green energy movement. It's China, as they produce solar panels and EV
it's
batteries.
China, and it's about graft and greediness.
Yeah.
It's China, but there's also a lot of companies. There's a lot of individuals who've made serious bank. There are a lot of college professors that have made serious bank just by feeding into the hysteria. So one of the things people need to understand is even the climate data, even the temperature data that we have, the long-term historical climate data has been so distorted by the various entities that have an interest in pushing this agenda. So there is almost one of the only pure forms, and most recently in terms of data related to temperatures is NOAA's satellite data, and they hide that with every fiber of their being because it doesn't show the same kinds of things of what they're doing with their manipulation and their models.
Yeah.
The way they homogenize data, the way they homogenize weather stations, the way they ignore the urban heat index. There's lots of ways in which they have manipulated the data and distorted the data. And that's why I just think it's so important that we have advocates for these industries because it's in the best interest of every citizen. Really, it's in the best interest of everybody around the world.
Yeah.
If we're not producing the energy that dictators and despots are, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, they're the ones that are producing the energy. We need to do it right here.
Well, and it affects literally every single aspect of our lives.
Every aspect of our lives.
Touches everything. I'm curious to hear from you as someone who has now served in Congress both under the Biden administration for 2 years and now serving under the Trump administration, whether it be on that energy policy front or other policy issues. If you had to point out some of the massive differences, the major differences, the compare and contrast that you have seen, what have those things been?
So when we talk about Make America Great Again or America First, all that translates into is that we love our country. We love America. And President Trump loves America. President Trump loves Americans. President Trump loves our history. He loves what we stand for. He loves what we've done. He loves the fact that we have been able to, again, pull people out of poverty and make them entrepreneurs. In the United States, and I think I'm a classic example of this, I grew up in a house where we didn't have central heating. We had a wood-burning stove, and in the wintertime, we lived in a log cabin. It wasn't intended to be a log cabin. That's just the only building materials they had. And it had plaster on the outside, but it had never been insulated because that wasn't when it was built. In the wintertime, it was so cold in that house, we would take big Montgomery Ward catalogs and we'd put them on the stove and heat them through and wrap them in fabric and take them to bed to stay warm at night because it got that cold at night. We didn't really even have hot water bottles and they wouldn't keep you warm anyway. Now, I lived where we were, my parents always said, you got to keep yourself alive. They gave us a lot of responsibility at a very young age to make sure that we were taking care of ourselves, our siblings, anyone who came there to visit. We had a lot of responsibilities growing up. We did not have a lot of money. I told you when my parents brought me home from the hospital, I was their fifth child. They had $35 in the bank and they were over $200,000 in debt. Everything that we ever had, we earned. We worked very, very hard to get. And then look where I am.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. as a member of Congress. Only in America can you do that. Whether you are a man or a woman, whether you're Black or Asian, it doesn't matter. The opportunity in this country is off the charts because we've made it that way. And that's why we love America. That is what has always set us apart from other countries. Our very foundational documents were based upon the concept of freedom. And freedom means that you can become anything. You have the same side of the coin is freedom and responsibility. I had a lot of freedom growing up. I could be gone all day, and mom and dad would say, well, where were you all day? Out playing with whatever it was. But we also had a lot of responsibility, and the responsibility always was, you got to keep yourself alive. Because if something happened up there, and we had some pretty serious injuries, it took hours to get to a hospital. So you learn how to take care of yourself. You learn a lot of life lessons. But at the same time, what that tells you, in America, it really is the land of opportunity. That's what comes out of the Trump administration. What comes out of the Biden administration and Democrat authority is control and dictatorship and telling us that everything is bad. There is no hope. There is no redemption. There is no, we're still reliving slavery from 170 years ago. There could never be redemption. They refer to it as the original sin, despite the Civil War, despite the 1964 Civil Rights Act, despite our Bill of Rights and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. There's never any hope. There's never any moving on. There's never any recognition that the future is before us and we can make it as good or as bad as we want to. So just from a philosophical standpoint, I think that there's so much more hope in our country right now. And that's not even talking about the governance side. That's not even talking about the policy side. But I think that is important because I think that when you look at Europe, and I read a lot about what's going on over there, they're really in the doldrums. And maybe that's not the right word, but they know that they're sliding backwards. They know they're losing their culture. They know that they're losing what has always made Europe such a great country culturally, historically, literature, in terms of literature. And they're all setting that aside because of this philosophy that, the earth's going to end and there is no hope. And we just this bizarre mentality, the same thing in Canada. And I look at where we are in the United States right now, and I see that we're in the middle of a renaissance. We are in the middle of a renaissance. And when I'm home, I feel that. There's a lot of hope. And I think that that's what's so exciting about the times that we're in right now. I also think that that's what you're seeing, with this last gasp or this last grasp from the Democrats, the violence that you're seeing, the hysteria at Republican town halls, the attacks on Tesla, it is, I always say, a badger's the most dangerous when you got him cornered. And that's kind of how I feel about what they're doing. They're trying so desperately to hold on to this control that they've had and this mentality that they've had. And so we're seeing it play out. But I think we've got to recognize that that's going to happen. But in a very short period of time, it really is a new day in America.
Wow. It's encouraging to hear you speak.
Well, I really believe that.
Yeah.
And I feel it when I'm home in Wyoming. When I walk through airports, I came to work early today and went down to the tidal basin to look at the cherry blossoms. I was walking through, a lot of people, and people recognized me and came and talked to me, and they're very excited.
Yeah.
They're happy. And I think that's a great thing.
That is a great thing. Well, I need to let you go, but as we close here, what encouragement would you want to speak for young women, for women who come to you and say, I want to be a member of Congress, or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to have a ranch.
You can do anything you want to do. There's nothing that holds you back. But educate yourself. You have to read. You have to study. You have to learn history. Read. I mean, that was the big thing that my parents always did. Is we are a family of readers, and we always have been. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Yeah. We have to understand what happened before us so that we know how to lead into the future. I don't care if you're a man, a woman, a girl, a boy. I don't care what race you are. I don't care where you came from. In America, there is the promise of opportunity. And my advice to them is just follow your heart.
Yeah. Beautiful. Congresswoman, thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership. We appreciate you joining the show.
Thank you.
Oh, I love her. She's fantastic.
I love hearing her story.
Yeah, it's really just surprising. Like, wow, I didn't know so much about that in regards to how she grew up, and really neat to hear where people come from and where they wind up. Life is wild.
She definitely put Wyoming on the map for me.
I want to go. I've never actually been to Wyoming, but
well, do they have a lot of pollen? Because you might want to.
They don't. It might be a great time to go.
Perfect.
No pollen in Wyoming. We're just bringing that full circle, aren't we?
seriously.
All right, we need to go eat these cruffins that we got.
I'm going to work through those cruffins over the next 24 hours. They are huge.
They're huge.
Thank you, Tim Young.
Thank you, Tim Young. All right, we will see you guys right back here next week.